technically speaking, when we speak about Americans and slavery, we have to understand something. Americans were not the only ones to do slavery. There were also the Arabs, okay? And the Muslims or Arabics, whatever you want to call them. The reality is this. They were harsh to their black slaves. They had more black slaves than the Europeans did. They had more black slaves over in the Middle Eastern countries than the Americans did. But what they did was they took the women, they added them as concubines. And the men, they made eunuchs. They castrated them. So that's why you'll see a couple that are dark, but a lot of the black community in these Middle Eastern countries were not able to reproduce properly because, again, the men were being castrated. Now, the difference is in America, though we separated slaves and we treated them as product, at some point, they were still able to reproduce because, again, we used them as a product. So they would, sneak and get married. That's where the jumping of the broom comes from. You jump the broom. That's why now black couples still jump the broom. That's where that came from. Though they didn't allow it, the Africans still did it. Now follow me. We graduated from that point, and at some point, the black family became strong. Right. Husband and wife became strong. This was a pillar in the black community, the husband and the wife together. I mean, even if, God forbid, husband was sleeping around, having different kids, wife was not leaving husband, and wife was taking in husband's estranged kids. You know what I mean? We didn't, black people, we were not for divorce. Once we understood the concept of marriage, that's what we was on. And even when this feminist movement came, black women wasn't really with that, because at the end of the day, that was about white women who couldn't vote. And so they were now like, we didn't able to our men. But again, black people on a whole nother side. You understand what I'm saying? This is what happened. In the 1960s, a man named Lyndon Baines Johnson stepped on the scene. And he implemented the war on poverty. And he implemented a war on poverty when there was not really an emergency. You understand what I'm saying? Because listen, we had the Great Depression. Remember, when the Great Depression happened, Franklin Roosevelt was like, okay, I'm only going to help those who register as Democrats. So a lot of black people registered as Democrats for that time. But as soon as the Great Depression was over, we went right back to the Republican Party, right? So now, once the civil rights thing happened and they trying to make this change, Lyndon B. Johnson brings in this war on poverty. And what was he doing? His agenda was, I'm going to become their daddy. We got to make the Democratic Party their daddy, okay? So now today, you see women that are on welfare getting these checks, WIC, all of these governmental programs are not allowed to be married. You cannot be married to get this. On top of that, you cannot work a certain amount of hours or make a certain amount of money, or this cuts the benefits that you get. And for a lot of people, they will prefer to get these free benefits rather than get married and work. So this has been the change going forward for a while, to where women depended on the government and kicked the husband out. And now you have men who were made to have families, who were designed to not only reproduce, but take care of what they reproduce and cultivate what they reproduce, right? And because they don't have that, they're now on the block. They have nothing to do. So what do? They get into gang violence. They get into stealing. They get into this. They get into that. And then that's how they ended up in jail. So the family really was broken once welfare hit the scene. And now we're seeing that now. And again, we had the church. We had the black churches. But the black churches didn't step up and condemn this system. They co-signed this system, okay? And they made single mothers the widows. Bible speaks in Timothy on how we're supposed to treat our widows. These are women who work diligently. Their husbands died. They're older now. They need help. But now we've put single mothers on a pedestal like widows, and and they're really in sin. They're having sex. They're not getting married. They're reproducing, and the more babies they have, the more money they get. So again, that's an incentive to keep reproducing and keep government as daddy and not get married and not do the right thing. And so now, years down the line, we are watching that happen.
Right.
We are watching the results of that.
Yeah, my understanding, Bevelyn, was that pre the war on poverty, And actually, even coming out of the slave movement, the Black family was one of the strongest family systems in America.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of how they dealt with some
Yes.
of the oppression that they had, because they needed to essentially have a safe, a protected place. And so the Black family unit was extremely strong, had deep convictions and deep values. And
Mm-hmm.
then my understanding is that when Lyndon B. Johnson, President Johnson, in '64 did that war on poverty, he actually had people go door to door
Mm-hmm.
in some of the poorer aspects of our cities and offer to the women, hey, you could have all of these things if you get rid of the man.
Mm-hmm.
And
And what
so,
did they do? They went with it.
and they went with it, and
Yeah.
it's actually flipped. So we actually have a reversal. The percentage, what used to be 80% of Black families were two-parent families, were strong. It's now flipped, where it's 80% are missing the father in the home.
Mm-hmm.
So AJ, go ahead and share on this idea and kind of my theory about like the whole idea of the need to matter and the role of the father in the Black community.
So I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. I would just add to this this idea of the community missing the wiring to understand experience to experience their identity and value. One of the things that we have to understand, I believe, as a believer, where does our identity come from? Number one, it comes from our Father. And so when we understand that that standpoint as a believer, we understand that you cannot understand who you truly are without the Father. And as I look at my family and I look at, my cousins and things like that, you can clearly see, what is missing from each person in the family. You have some where you had two parents in the home, very strong. You have most of them that are educated, most of them that are doing something in life because they understand who they are. And so that is the important things, because you have people, Black people, since we're talking about it, who's on a search. They're 30, they're 40 of who they are. They never been told who they are. So they are in a pursuit to fill a deficit within themselves because they never understood who they were. And this is why you have many, I'm dealing with people in my church right now, Black, white, many who are these young people who are looking for a sense of who they are. They're struggling in school. They're doing all these things. And it's those kids who are without a father. So without a father being in the home, we have to understand, if we look at it from a spiritual standpoint, the only way I really know who I am is by the Father. Yeah. And I stand on that conviction, because you have believers too who have been in church. I mean, we've seen it for years and never draw close to a relationship with God. And you can tell because they don't operate. Right. They don't operate out of a place of knowing who they are. So they're operating from a place of trying to work for love instead of operating from a place of love.